Back or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week, and with us is Craig Kapitas of Quartz, the Atlantic Group's business website. Also with us, Anne Bagamuri of the International Herald Tribune, Gil Mahali of Israeli daily newspaper Yediot Aharonot, and from the Nouvel Observateur, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, French News Weekly magazine. Tunisia's interim president among world leaders taking the podium at the 67th UN General Assembly this week in New York, Monsef Marzouki, also penning an op-ed piece in the New York Times where he wrote that democratization in Egypt and Tunisia have refuted, quote, the myth that democracy and Islam are incompatible. Still, though, he's got his work cut out, admits so himself. He's called for help in strengthening democracy. Case in point, this August rally against a bill that would have gone back on equal rights for women. The Islamist-led government eventually backtracking on wording in the new constitution that would have considered women complementary to men instead of equal. And then there's this latest story. On September the 3rd, police pulled over a young couple in their car while one officer accompanied the fiancé to an ATM machine to get cash for a bribe. The other two allegedly raped the woman. They're now in jail, but now magistrates have charged her with public indecency.
The victim told me that if they thought harassing her would get her to retract her statement, they're wrong. She said she'll fight this right to the end. That is really brave in this country, with all the social pressure as well as the accusations that the police are heaping on her. She's amazingly tenacious and determined.
And Bagamuri, there's a demonstration planned in Tunis on Saturday. There was also one planned over the weekend here coming up in Paris over this issue. There's a feeling, it seems, in Tunisia that there's a kind of political vacuum and that it's leading to things like this.
There's probably also an enormous vacuum in terms of where the society is going. I mean, Tunisia was one of the countries in which a lot of hope reposed. It was the first Arab Spring country, and it seemed as though the government was moving in the direction of greater rights, greater human rights, and certainly greater rights for women. When you see something like this, you realize that it doesn't happen overnight, and that there are still elements in this particular society that would prefer to see women subjugated by use of force. And in a case like this, you just realize that it's one of the arms that a society has, and it often, unfortunately, comes at a time when there is a surge of hope, when things are getting better for women. Often it calls a backlash, and I think this incident can be seen in that light.
With the public prosecutor talking of pressing charges, it's Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet. The Tunisia was the country that sort of emblematic of women's rights in North Africa.
Absolutely, and there is a growing concern in Tunisia, but also in Egypt, about the usage of rapes as a political tool to get women to be more submissive, socially submissive. And it's quite spreading in the Middle East, and it's a huge concern. We have seen journalists being raped, we have almost raped in Egypt, for instance. It's really symbolic of what's happening socially for women. It's a backlash, as you said, it's a backlash.
All right, and it's a story that we will continue to follow on France 24. Now, spare a thought for Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian leader at the rostrum of the UN General Assembly, formally announcing his request for super observer status that could immediately give a future Palestinian state access to United Nations institutions and agencies. That statement, though, overshadowed by this.
A diagram for you. Here's a diagram. This is a bomb. This is a fuse. In the case of Iran's nuclear plans to build a bomb, this bomb has to be filled with enough enriched uranium. And Iran has to go through
All right, Benjamin Netanyahu using some show and tell during his explanation there at the United Nations in New York. Gil Mahali, that's quite a prop he had there.
Yes, and I think he was successful. That's what he wanted, that everyone will talk about it, that everyone will talk about Iran. that no one will talk about Abbas. I think he did a good job.
And this was with an eye to
Sorry?
this was with an eye to keeping the discussion about Iran and not at all about the Palestinian issue.
Not only it was a side benefit. I mean, I don't think he's cynical about Iran. I think he's really concerned about Iran. Of course, he uses that in order to overshadow other issues. I think every time there's a new buzzword. So the buzzword in the last couple of months was the red line. Should there or should there be a red line? It's the game theory. How is the best way to pass the message? So now he took a marker, a red pencil, and everyone has red line in his head. Everyone understands the Israeli position. He did what every publicity expert is doing for us 20 times a day.
All right.
It's very clever and strong. It's a good way to memorize every argument he had to say. We can all see now what's happening in Iran in a metaphorical way, in a graphic way. It's very good, very good political move.
And yet, Craig Kapitas, there's been like the Washington Post comparing it to like a Looney Tunes cartoon, the way the bomb is drawn, and there's been quite a lot of derision after this presentation.
I don't think Mr. Netanyahu takes derision from the Washington Post very seriously. It was extremely effective. Back in the day, what's going on here now, the red lines, it was called brinksmanship. And Netanyahu is a pro. I agree. I thought it was extremely effective. I do also believe that Netanyahu is very, very concerned and serious about this threat. And I have a suspicion that a lot of what he's saying is being directed towards Muslim regimes in the region who don't like the regime in Tehran any more than the Israelis do. Because if push comes to shove in this thing, which way is Saudi Arabia going to go? They're no friends of the Persians. That's
No, this message was for the American voters.
yeah.
Well,
He's participating in the elections in the United States with that.
He's not participating in them. He's
Participating,
reacting to them.
yeah.
He's reacting to them, and this presentation made it very clear. I mean, he watches the polls, he watches the news. He's seen that Obama is pulling ahead of Romney, and if you notice what he said, that he's not going to. He's pushing everything down the road. He's saying, well, we think that Iran is a lot closer to getting a bomb than the Americans do. We think it's going to happen sometime next year, which pushes it past the elections. There's still a possibility of an October surprise that he's going to pull a trigger or push a button and cause a problem. But for the moment, I think he's looking at the same polls as everybody else is and saying, we're going to have to deal with Obama. I'm not going to get to deal with my friend Mitt Romney.
Can he do it?
And I'd better cool the conversation down.
Let me ask you a question, Ann. The White House just saying that there was a planned phone call that took place this Friday between Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you think the tone would have really been like in that phone call after that speech?
I have a feeling the tone was probably something along the lines of, look, we both know we have to work together. Let's go forward on that basis. Let's let bygones be bygones for the ramping up. We all know, if this is Obama speaking, we all know I'm going to be the one winning. You're going to be working with me, and I'm willing to work with you. So unclench your fist and let's talk.
There is one thing to be said about that demonstration, the contrast between the cartoonesque aspect of it and the very seriousness of Netanyahu make it all the more effective. That's true, it's a little funny, but he's very serious, and it's good. It's good communication.
On
really
the World
good
This Week's Facebook page, Marpa in Tehran posted a cartoon by Carlos Latouf that reminds everyone that while Iran doesn't have the bomb, Israel does. And there you see Netanyahu sitting on his own bomb there. Stealing Netanyahu's thunder, though, was his own foreign ministry. Sorry, I'm going to quote the competition here, Gil. Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz, quoting diplomats who say sanctions are working and ratcheting them up is the way forward. So it seems as though it wasn't the Americans who may have undermined a bit that speech. It was people inside of the Israeli foreign ministry.
Well, anyway, the problem with the Iranian issue that we don't know much about what's really the information. We were just gossiping with breadcrumbs. We don't know anything. And there's a very tricky game. In French, you call it poker menteur.
Liar's poker.
Liar's poker. Everyone is paying lying. Everyone is lying to everyone, starting with its allies. Just one remark about the agenda and the Romney issue. Let's just assume that Romney will win the elections. He will be sworn in late January. Okay, so if Obama is against bombing Iran and Romney wants to bomb Iran immediately, he can't do it before January 22nd in the evening. And then he will find himself with Dempsey, with Panetta, and with what's in the CIA, which are probably now the same. They have the same analysis of the situation as Obama. So we have to fire them. You have to hire new people that will need a few weeks, a few months to study the situation. Okay? So even if Romney wins, how can you do anything before May, June? So actually,
if he wins, he's the president. He can pretty much do whatever he wants.
no, but I mean,
if he wants to push a button, he can do it.
One final point on this, and I'm putting it to Anne Bagamuri here. Your parent newspaper, the New York Times, expressing what seemed to me personally as mild disappointment for his last time at the UN General Assembly, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad did nothing to trigger the ritual walkout by the West during his speech. In fact, the paper quotes a European diplomat as saying, previously we've walked out because of his anti-Semitism, threats against Israel, and 9/11 conspiracies. This year, his only crime was incoherence.
He's getting old.
Do you share that disappointment?
Well, UN Week is always a carnival. There's lots of posturing. There's lots of serious business that's transacted, although people I know who would criticize the UN say that's never the case. I thought that the American delegation boycotted Ahmadinejad's speech. So, so they
couldn't walk out.
So
they were
never there.
Place.
So they removed themselves from the stage.
It is to be said that François Hollande made his first big UN speech during this week. So it was not. It was good. It was not that bad. It was. He's getting good at it.
All right.
Not much things to be said.
He's learning
about
on
it.
the job, Craig.
That's it.
It's
On
a
the
learning
job
curve.
training.
You have to accept it.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Let's go across the channel before we go. It's the UK's answer to Mitt Romney chastising the 47% at that fundraiser. The chief whip for the ruling Conservative Party, Andrew Mitchell, last week, chewing out the Bobby on the beat at number 10 Downing Street that wouldn't let him ride his bicycle through the main gate. It was pretty bad, calling a policeman a moron and a pleb. Cue to that ritual of political scandals, the apology.
I didn't show the police the amount of respect I should have done. We should all respect the police. They do an incredibly difficult job. I've apologised to the police. I've apologised to the police officer involved on the gate, and he's accepted my apology. And I hope very much that we can draw a line under it there.
The police are very clear about what you said. You don't seem to be. Did you call them pleb?
I'm very clear about what I said and what I didn't say, and I want to make it absolutely clear that I did not use the words that have been attributed to me.
Ooh, that was a mistake. Calling a policeman a moron and a pleb. And then the police, disgruntled over cutbacks, it should be said, all too happy to leak the precise transcript of, I guess you could call it a conversation. Best you learn your effing place. You don't run this effing government. You're effing plebs. Gate, as it's now called, suddenly has legs on it, as evidenced by this Adams cartoon in the Daily Telegraph, the Gate Escape. Or reporters like Anne McElvoy of the Evening Standard recalling the day I thought Andrew Mitchell was going to deck me. The clamor heard as far away as New York, where David Cameron was at the UN answering reporters in the company of the Indonesian and Liberian presidents.
As I said very clearly, he gave an apology. It was right that he apologized. What happened was wrong and shouldn't have happened and must never happen again. But on the basis that he has given an apology and the police have decided not to pursue that any further, that is how matters should rest.
Anne Bagamuri, incredible.
Well, is it? Things like this take on a life of their own because they play into what people either do believe or want to believe about the people involved. I mean, the Mitt Romney tape
That's true of every great political scandal.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, the Tories, who have been trying very, very hard to ditch their reputation as a nasty party, as a party of elitists. And it's not easy to do when most of the members of, when most of the leaders of those parties have the kinds of educations that you make them elite. But when something like this happens and a member of the government plays class war, seems to play class warfare with a working man, there are going to be plenty of people who believe it, and it's just going to take on a life of its own.
Craig Kapidis, this was supposed to be last week's scandal. That first part of the apology was fine. Why did he then have to go and deny what he said?
Because the Tory party is a party of Monty Python characters. They always use the phrase "absolutely clear," saying this absolutely clearly, very clearly, and images are important, particularly in politics. And none of us here are British, but we've all seen Monty Python and the other British sitcoms. And you look at this fellow here on the screen, and he looks like John Cleese with a white wig doing a routine. And you look at yourself and you say, how did this man get elected in the first place? I'm surprised he's still in office, that he hasn't been chastised. But what it goes to prove is that England, unlike France, is really a class society. It really is.
Well, the other thing, I mean, to your question about why did he lie or why did he deny it, there are so many cases in which it would be so much simpler to simply tell the truth. And you see politicians, Anthony Weiner, the guy who tweeted his pictures of his private parts, first saying that his account had been hacked and then saying, well, I can't verify that that's actually me. And then finally it comes out, oh, yeah, it was me, and I've been flirting over Twitter for years.
Politicians are under a lot of pressure. I mean, if they admit something, it will go.
The cover-up is always worse than the crime.
It is
stick with them till the end.
Absolutely, which Watergate taught us.
Yeah, they should tell the truth, but they're tempted with not telling the truth because they know that it will follow them during the whole of the career.
If he had come out and said, yeah, I called him an effing plebe, you know what? Everyone would have get good on you, mate, or something. It would have taken
maybe
on a
he would have been
completely
fired. You can't say that for sure.
Craig Kapidis quoting Richard Nixon is where we'll have to leave it, but I want to thank you. I also want to thank Gil Miley, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, and Anne Bagamary. Thank you for joining us here for The World This Week.